Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of the Comedy Dining Experience, where we're not going to actually watch the film Starship Troopers, because we want to have a bit of a talk about it instead, in part, to be honest, because when I spoke to... I should also point out who I'm introducing into this. My goodness, where are my manners?
No, you don't need to.
Tonight on this very investigative panel, I have Triv from Trivial Theatre and
Hello.
Ben from Ben's Flat.
and Ben from England.
Yes.
He's joining us tonight to talk about bombs.
Yes. So basically, the what originally happened was about 4 or 5 months ago. We're recording this in June.
This is a TYTD podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around about April, May time, I watched Starship Troopers for the first time after a number of people basically harassed and abused
suck it up,
me.
Cupcake.
For years, I was treated as no good than a common thief and criminal.
Dan's American friends bullied him for not watching the film.
They did. They bullied me a lot and made me feel very sad.
Oh, you poor
all of the time.
freaking baby. Suck it up.
Yeah, I agree with that. Any excuse to rip you, basically. Yeah, fuck you, Dan.
You're so mean.
Dan, why have you not watched Hollow Man?
I have watched Hollow Man. I love Hollow Man.
Watch it again.
Okay, fine.
Good.
I'm happy with that.
Good, do that.
So basically, after about 2 or 3 years of non-stop harassment to watch Starship Troopers, I finally sat and watched Starship Troopers, and the plan was to watch it and then do a full-length commentary with it with my good friend Ben to go through all the details of it. And after watching it, I didn't have a lot to say. Certainly not enough to fill 2 hours, nor did Ben. And Triv, who has just joined us on our very lovely drugs commentary track, has agreed to kind of come in on this as well to sort of have a bit more of a discussion about the film, and it will inevitably end up being a wider discussion about Paul Verhoeven movies because, you know, who doesn't love RoboCop?
Thing is, right, I haven't actually watched Starship Troopers in about 12 years. So I don't really have much of anything to say about it. I'm just moderating busus with this thing that you're doing, whatever it is.
Well, this is the thing, you know. I mean, basically, after watching the film, my overall opinion on it was that it was not a bad film, but not something that I would probably watch again. It was kind of just okay. And my 2 main sort of reasons for it were that I found it a bit overly long for what it is. I know it's supposed to be this big space sort of sci-fi epic, and it's kind of a similar thing to the James Bond films where it's 2 hours because that is kind of what is expected of this kind of genre of film. But I got about an hour and a half in, and I just really started flagging on it because it just didn't really feel like a lot was kind of happening within the film itself. And the other issue that I kind of found with it was that as somebody who absolutely loves vintage films, and in particular vintage films about things like public health or war propaganda movies or things like that, where they really, really play up that, you know, do your bit and save the country type situation, I found that watching it in Starship Troopers, I kind of, because I'm a bit too close to it because of what I do with the channel and obviously all the sort of stuff that I watch, I just kind of felt that it had been a bit done. Especially by the time that Starship Troopers had come along, there had been plenty of films that had kind of mocked that sort of era of filmmaking. So by the time this came in, rather than me kind of sitting there going, wow, that's a really scathing attack on it, I just kind of ended up feeling a bit like...
Starship Troopers, isn't it not? It's not attacking a style of film, though, is it? It's a comment on fascism in general. It's attacking a political worldview. It's not really.
Yeah,
it's not really attacking a style of filmmaking. It might be sort of paying homage to that kind of film just to sort of play along with the style. But isn't it more of a comment on the nature of fascism in general and how easily people become sort of acclimatized to it or radicalized by it even?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I would agree with that, and I think that a good chunk of the film is very much in that vein and ilk, but there's always this veneer of that kind of level of propaganda over the top of it, which I think it personally works a lot better in something like RoboCop, for example, where you can see the kind of capitalist system is so ingrained in every facet of life that you can't move for seeing a television. I think almost every shot in RoboCop has a television screen on and broadcasting something in the background, or everything has a sort of price attached to it. With Starship Troopers, that kind of war propaganda vibe runs all the way through it, and the elements where it talks about fascism and how the film kind of expresses that, I thought were some of the better points of the film, definitely, but I just always felt that message was kind of undercut by what I didn't really enjoy in the form of that propaganda film stuff. It just kind of, like I say, it felt a bit done by the time Starship Troopers was doing it. So having that constant veneer of it over the top just made me kind of go, oh, okay, fine, but it didn't quite have the power behind it that I think it could have had if it hadn't explored that option, if you know what I mean.
I think so. So just so I'm clear, the parts that were they kind of did the war is hell thing, they were out fighting and being slaughtered by the bugs and like that whole bit and them training, and so that stuff was cool with you, but like where you see the kids like stepping on roaches and they do like kind of the over the top voiceover and stuff, that's the part that didn't quite work for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for example, the beginning of the film, they do the classic thing that they did with a lot of kind of 30s, 40s and 60s propaganda, particularly around stuff like Vietnam, where they have all of these really cute and cool up-and-coming kids who are hanging out and having a great life. And, the idea of war is discussed by them as this great thing that they can't wait to do. And there's just been so many films that have kind of done that already that I don't feel like Starship Troopers really did anything that different, apart from the fact that it was framed in a kind of future world.
Wouldn't you say that, though, it's kind of like juxtaposing, like, oh, come join us, we're crushing bugs and we're making the world safe for whatever. And then you see, like, all these guys come in and they're all excited and stuff. And then they go through all the training and they get the camaraderie, and then they get to where they're, and everything is cool, and then they get to the actual bugs and it's like, oh shit, and then they start dying. That's kind of what I took from it. Like, it keeps juxtaposing back and forth, and then you get the folks like Neil Patrick Harris's character that are still, I guess, brainwashed into that being, and they live that whole sense of being. And then you get to the people that are like, well, this isn't right. And then, those bugs have more to them and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And I think that's probably the element of Starship Troopers that I enjoyed the most is the fact that they get so personal in showing how these people's lives, the impact of war that it has upon them, not only affects them kind of on an emotional level because of what they witness, but it also affects their friendship fundamentally. Like, all of the main characters kind of split off and do their own thing, and that changes them fundamentally as well. That kind of stuff I quite enjoyed about it. But it's just like, for starters, like things like the fact that it takes so much time to get to that point. Like, you have a good half an hour to 40 minutes where, before anything even happens, where it's just the characters kind of palling around and sort of going to, this is before even basic training begins, where they're just kind of wandering about.
School.
Yeah. I mean, I get that they want to establish the characters and kind of bring that element up a little bit, but to me, it felt like it was a very long-winded way, especially when you've seen so many of these, like, propaganda recruitment films where it's like, Johnny is a happy boy and he's going to go and fight for his country. And you spend 40 minutes with these main characters who just kind of don't really do a lot, and it's just them sort of really reinforcing that positive all-American kind of attitude.
Could it be kind of like they're looking at, like, you look at movies of that era and they do kind of have that, they want to establish like Final Destination or The Faculty, like they kind of show the environment of the school and stuff. They just overdid that a bit. Like, oh, this is the world that they live in and all that kind of stuff. I know you could have brought that up with the, like, the all-American aspect, but maybe, like, the studio was like, okay, you need to show, get people into it by showing this, oh, well, look at how happy everybody is, and, just normal kids, and, like, I don't know, like, kind of teen movie thing.
Yeah, no, I could agree with you to a point on that one. I feel as well though that like a good reason they use a lot of footage at the beginning is, I suppose, to establish the fact that it's kind of a future world. Because once you get past that, the vast majority of the film basically takes place in quarries.
It does.
You know, you spend the first sort of 40 minutes walking around all glass buildings and, you know, eating space food and, you know, talking about playing like hover football or whatever it is they play in the middle of the middle of the film, and then literally like 2/3 to half of the movie is just set in the desert, and there's just nothing there.
I feel like you're dancing around the fact that, and this isn't a wrong opinion to have by any means, but I feel like you're dancing around the fact of saying that you were quite bored by it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that by the end of it, like I say, sort of the last half of the film, I was kind of clock watching. Another thing that kind of bothered me as well is Neil Patrick Harris just sort of disappears for a decent chunk of the film. He's in it for like the first 20, and you kind of think, oh, okay, he's going to be involved. And then he sort of turns up 2 or 3 times in the middle for like 30 seconds apiece in this nearly 2.5 hour film. And then he turns up again at the very end, and that's it. And given that he's kind of quite important to how the final act plays out, to sort of have him vanish in the middle was a bit odd to me. But yeah, I found the majority of the film just kind of... I feel like it could have worked a lot better as a tighter package. If it was something that was, say, you know, your standard 90 minutes going up to 1 hour and 3/4. But the fact that it goes well past 2 hours, like I say, it just kind of left me a bit cold. I just kind of spent a lot of time going, okay, well, I get the message you're trying to put across. Why are you beating me over the head with it? You know.
And that might have been the point, too, to some extent.
That's true. That is very true. I mean, that's one of the big elements of propaganda cinema of that era, was the fact that they literally beat you into submission with it. They made it so wall to wall that this was a great thing that you had to go and do. But yeah, you know, I could understand it from that approach.
Now that said, I definitely I haven't seen. I'm like Ben. I haven't seen Starship Troopers in a decent amount of time, so I'm drawing from like the last time I watched it, kind of a thing. So I apologize. My input. I don't have as much input as I probably should.
I feel like I always feel like this is like a primal scream for you, Dan. It's like you had to get this out in some form or another. You know what I mean? Like, you had to unleash this feeling about this nearly 25-year-old film in some way or another.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to put it to bed, and I thought that if we did a 2-hour commentary on it, I figured if we did like a 2.5 hour commentary on it, the vast majority of it would probably just be us sat inside.
It would be crap, is what you're saying. It'd be like our head commentary. It just wouldn't be very good.
Yeah, it'd just be us sort of sitting there, just acknowledging the film's existence, which isn't really productive.
This is like Ebert and Siskel in a bit, but instead of like blah blah blah, I hate you, it's actually, you know, quite constructive. It's nice.
it cuts to the heart of the matter.
It's like watching. It's like during the drug PSA, watching that lady tell her horrific story over the course of 20 minutes, and we're sitting there going on about, you know, raw doll and snozberries.
Exactly.
At least you didn't have the criticism that Roger Ebert had of the film, where he genuinely seemed to think that it was espousing some of the philosophies that it was against. Like, he seemed to genuinely think that the film was actually like a fascist, like, call to arms or something. Like, I don't think that was an ironic thing. I think he genuinely believed that. Because Roger Ebert was a man who was 95% wrong about most things in the world.
And yet he set the standard for modern film reviewing.
He did, and you know, he was fantastic at it. I actually don't agree with most things he says, but I like the way he says them. Like his takedown of A Clockwork Orange, I don't agree with any part of it, but it's gloriously put together. It's a strange emotion to have.
He certainly had a way with words.
I'll never forget his a quote from his Clockwork Orange review, where he said that it was a right-wing fantasy masquerading as an Orwellian warning, and I thought, that sounds great.
Yeah,
sounds all right.
Well, it's the same way a lot of people look at Blazing Saddles today and assume that it's like pro all those things that we're against. It's like, No, it's making a commentary on dumbass white people.
Yeah, and he did the same thing 2 years later with Fight Club, where he was convinced that he was convinced it was genuinely like espousing the men's right philosophies of Tyler Durden. Even though, if you actually pay attention to the film, you will see he's a crazy person who shouldn't be listened to. That's the whole point. But he seems to have like fallen asleep, or maybe he was getting a donut or something during that bit. I don't know. But he doesn't seem to have paid any attention to that part of it, as in the part where it's like, no, you're not supposed to take that away from it. This is being said by the villain of the piece, but whatever.
Did he also believe that Blair Witch Project, that those three kids were still out wandering the wilderness of Maryland?
Yeah, he went out in the woods going, gotta find those kids.
I give them being missing 2 thumbs down. But this is the thing, I mean, when it comes to the troopers at least, I could maybe possibly see a subsection of the audience going into there and coming away from it going, wow, those guys were so great. I'm glad they got them bugs.
There's always that risk though, isn't it, when you're playing with ideas of irony and satire?
That happens regardless. It could be anything. Like, look at the not to like spoil things, but like Homelander from The Boys. It's clearly a very satirical look at, America's obsession with superheroes that are themed American and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, after all the shit that he does, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh my god, he's not a good guy. It's like, how have you been missing this the past, 3 years?
Yeah, going back to Fight Club, the fact that people, after that film, set up actual fight clubs. When the whole message of the film was to say that, the characters start off fighting each other, and then they become homeland terrorists. It's like, you're not meant to see that as the ideal way to live your life, and yet that's what people do. So there's always that risk when you're playing with ideas of irony and satire.
And every movie is going to have that one nutter that comes out and goes, well, clearly this is the way that I'm supposed to be because the movie told me to do it.
I hope you're all happy you've just put me a mental image of Roger Ebert's Fight Club in my head.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just him with no shirt on, just wearing his cream sort of chinos, just pulling people up to beat them.
Him and Gene Siskel duking it out. No, Full Metal Jacket's a load of shit. No, it isn't. Ah!
Leonard Maltin comes into it and he's like, I will give Laser Blast 2.5 stars, and then he headbutts a guy.
I suppose they did do that, didn't they, when they guest starred on their episode of The Critic? They had Ebert and Siskel had a knockabout fight on that, didn't they?
Yeah. I remember that episode. It was a good one.
Nice.
They also sang in that episode.
I do recommend. They do. Yeah. They were really great on that. But yeah, my strongest thoughts about Starship Troopers is when the end credits rolled, I just kind of sat there and went, well, that was 2 hours. And that was basically the beginning and end of it. And I just kind of sat there and went, well, I don't hate it. It's got a lot of stuff that's really quite decent in it. But I didn't really love it. And given the choice of Verhoeven's other work, I would much rather sit and watch something like Total Recall or RoboCop, or maybe even Showgirls to an extent.
You'd rather watch Showgirls than Starship Troopers.
I mean, more boobs.
What's not to like?
Showgirls is a work of hubris. It's the work of a director and a writer who are completely smelling the scents of their own farts and enjoying that scent gloriously. I mean, think of the combination: Paul Verhoeven, Joe. Is it Esterhaas? Esther. I'm mispronouncing his name. I don't care. I don't like him anyway. Who are just completely coked out of their heads, just oh no, get the chick from Saved by the Bell and she can have a weird swimmy sex scene with Kyle MacLachlan and it'll look like he's violently attacking her, but it's meant to be sexual. I don't know. I hate that film. It's horrible.
You know what's going on. Jessie Spano is sitting there. She had too many caffeine pills, and as compared to screaming, I'm so excited, she's just going doing a dance in the water.
10 Mel Gibsons being great, 1 Mel Gibson being shit. Well, how many Mel Gibsons?
5. It is a true neutral movie.
So 5 Mel Gibsons out of 10 Mel Gibsons.
Okay, here's another question. With a rating of things as like being your favorite movie, and whatever sits down at the lowest being your lowest movie, where does it sit?
It's nowhere near as good as Things. I'd much rather watch
So
Things.
that's a 10 Mel Gibson one.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd probably put it somewhere around maybe some of the not quite as good Roger Corman films of the day. You know, the ones that kind of just sort of sit in the middle that people go, oh yeah, that exists.
Good to know.
Yeah. Although I genuinely would rather watch Things. I enjoyed Things much more than Starship Troopers. Let the cancelling begin.
Of course you do.
Don't let Laura ever listen to this.
I would laugh, but it's not a surprising statement, really, is it? And
not even slightly.
Comedy comes from the unexpected, and that's not an unexpected thing for Dan to say. At all.
All of this is why I like you both so much.
Yeah, things like if you're talking parodies, I mean, I've just literally clocked it on my shelf, and that's another thing. If you're talking sort of self-aware, kind of taking off existing things, I would much rather watch something like The Ruttles or Spinal Tap if you're going down that kind of route.
Well, Spinal Tap is kind of a classic anyway.
But Starship Troopers isn't a parody; it's a satire. They're different things.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is true. But then wouldn't you say that Spinal Tap was a satire of rock bands in general rather than a parody?
It's a satire on the idea of a rock band and their... No, I wouldn't say Spinal Tap's a parody. Well, maybe it's both, because it's parodying the documentary form, but...
I was going to say, it's very much in that realm of... It takes itself, quote-unquote, seriously, but it's also making fun of it.
You're looking forward to the new one? They're making a new one.
Oh, coming to Paramount Plus, yeah.
Are they?
They're making a new Spinal Tap film,
yeah.
Which I actually quite like, because I think that, like, unlike with a lot of other, like, comebacks, the thing that makes... I think the fact that they're all older, fatter and greyer is what will somehow make it funnier. Because I think that if you have these guys who are... They're meant to be sort of past their prime in the first one, so no matter if they look older and fatter and greyer, that's just going to make it more funnier in my eyes. Just the idea that these guys are still not quite stopped that dream of, of what they were. Yes, so to draw to a close this very, very quick sort of chat around the whole world of Starship Troopers, I gave it an I just thought it was okay. And I'd probably still rather watch most of Verhoeven's other films before it. I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't love it. I just kind of went, that existed. What a controversial figure.
Okay.
So controversial.
Yeah, that's all right.
Dan is a controversial man.
He's a controversial man that enjoys things. So you take that how you will,
loves to be controversial.
Oh, I'm so edgy.
Controversial.
I am the anarchist.
Likes a bit of controversy.
And
while we've been talking, I ate an entire bag of squashies, so...
I knew you had a problem. I have one gremlin bar and I set you off and you're there like Grandmaster Flash doing white lines.
Oh, hell yeah.
So, let's wrap this up and then we'll talk about drugs. So thank you everybody for joining us on this very, very brief special edition of the Comedy Dining Experience where we talked about Starship Troopers with Trev and Ben, and it was quite short but we put our point across. Please stop messaging me asking me to watch Starship Troopers. Bye!
Bye-bye.
Hey Dan, will you watch Starship Troopers?
Oh god.